So you message Merlino for legal advice, basically, right? You message him for legal advice, and the ramifications of that is you get arrested. Well, it
Yeah,
starts
essentially, I was
because of the business cards, though. But they bring up Joey Merlino in court to be sensational.
Yes. Yeah, all stuff at that point that wasn't an issue until they got this phone call, because my messaging him on Instagram took place in like it was the middle of December. The shoveling snow was like, I believe it was the middle of January. But basically this violation was brought around middle of February after they said they got this phone call. And I have proof of all this. On the videos I posted on my channel, I read out and put screenshots from the admin warrant and things like that to try and document exactly what had happened. But the takeaway was somebody at the school was agitated that I was protesting, and they used probation as a intimidation technique, and probation had to scramble the higher ups, I guess, to figure out something. So they kind of reached to these obscure conditions.
An all-new kind of major organized crime bust. 23 people under arrest now accused of stealing guns and cash.
Today, police revealed 4 organized crime groups are wreaking havoc.
From aggravated robbery to kidnapping, burglary, and more. Let's take a look at this. New pictures from court documents in this case. These are a few of the people who have been charged, and investigators say the money, tens of thousands of dollars, is all stolen.
FBI, open up! Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Liam Schofield. What's up, man? Yeah, it's wild that they did that. And then to add Merlino on top of it.
Yeah, there was no reason to put him in there. They just, I mean, because technically the stipulation of the no social media use is what they're trying to, but they could have used many other instances, because the thing is, the probation officer I had at the time was not enforcing that. He basically was saying, I don't want to make things harder for you. I see you've got different things that you're working on. As long as you don't break the no contact with your mother, I'm not really going to give you a hard time about that. This new officer, Wilson, we never had a conversation changing those criteria. And when I had this previous officer, Mr. Christ, was when I messaged Mr. Merlino, and he never brought it up to me. He never said, I saw you did this, I have an issue with it. And he would have known every site that I visited. So it obviously became an issue when it needed to become an issue. And it was absurd because they can see what I said to him as well. So you can't sit there and try and allude to the fact that I'm doing something mobster-like when you can see our conversation and see nothing illegal took place. So it can't be both ways.
Like parole, like if you're on parole, you can't cohort with other felons and people that are on probation and felons and things like that. You'll get violated for that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's interestingly enough not a condition, I guess, in Delaware, because the entire time I've been on probation, that's one thing probation's never had an issue with. And I'm working with a nonprofit right now. And we're trying to kind of move into that field of helping people like in recovery and, trying to get jobs or housing or whatever. We're a startup. But a lot of the people I've been interacting with in different capacities are currently on probation. And I will say that this probation officer that I have has been fully supportive of that and has never said that that's an issue. So I don't know if that's just something they're not enforcing or if it's not a thing in Delaware. But like I said, they never brought issue with the fact that, like, it was not the official violation that Joey Merlino had a criminal record. It was just the fact officially that I used Instagram. But it was more so like a reason to just put his name in it unnecessarily because it's salacious.
So Joey Merlino does justice reform. He helps a lot of people. What would be your message to Joey Merlino in this situation you're in?
I would love to have an opportunity to talk to him. I know that he does a lot of work. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in Delaware. There's a lot of people working very hard for probation reform, which I know he worked hard for in Philadelphia with Meek Mills and some other people. There's a huge need for that in the state of Delaware. This probation system is completely out of control as it is. It causes a lot of needless pain and suffering, and that's definitely a battle worth undertaking.
Yeah, so Joey Merlino, if you're watching, reach out to him when it's legal, and you guys can have a conversation, right? Because you can't even do anything with your phone. They probably tracked my number, huh?
Oh yeah, they can see. I mean, they would see it anyway because they watch my YouTube channel. I've had my probation officer comment on videos I posted, but in addition to that, they can see everything I'm doing in real time too. So
what have they said anything about the YouTube content that you're putting out now?
So yeah, the probation officer that I have, he's been overall supportive. He's critiqued a couple things where he says like, well, this decision wasn't made by the judge, it was my supervisors, or given some feedback on stuff, but he hasn't really told me to take anything down or been like pressuring or anything. He's been kind of neutral about it. But they definitely are watching it. I can tell that by him because he'll reference, while I'll go in there, sometimes he'll reference things from the videos that I put up. So
are you worried about the future, the next year, putting content out and talking about things? Are you worried?
No, because I feel like I have no choice. Believe it or not, I'm more so an introvert, and I felt really uncomfortable doing this. I held off doing it for so long. When you look at the time span from 2016 when this started, I did put one video out, and some family and friends kind of pressured me to do it. That's on the channel, and then I never did anything else with anything. But as this continued with the no contact with my mother and all these different things, I felt like I had no choice but to kind of put myself out there to fight in a legal, appropriate manner to try and bring attention to things. So do I feel like, in a sense, that brings maybe retaliation or things like that? Yes, but on the other hand, silence hasn't done me any favors either.
No, especially you had a legal gun, and they charge you with some illegal gun. They say you concealed it, right?
Yes, it was. The main thing was concealed without a permit and being within 1,000 feet of a school and recreation zone. I was in downtown Wilmington. There's a couple issues because the area I live in is very anti-gun. The politicians, the powers that be, a lot of the police, they don't differentiate between basically somebody out there with an illegal gun who's maybe gangbanging or whatever, and somebody who's carrying a gun for self-defense because they're afraid of the very same violent crimes. To them, if you're not law enforcement, then they're going to kind of feel like, does this person really deserve to be able to have a gun? There's going to be kind of a tension there, an issue, And I just had the bad luck to run across this agency that, I might add, and I've covered this on my channel as well, so-called Operation Safe Streets is known. It's not just me. They are known for abuse of power, racism, corruption, planting evidence, so much so that the ACLU chapter here in Delaware has a dedicated initiative to shut them down. And these are the people that arrested me and brought this case to begin with. And I find it ironic that their word is considered so credible by the people involved in my case, the judges, the prosecutors that I've dealt with, when at the very same time, the ACLU has been able to document all these horrible things this agency has done. Like, it's obviously not just me, and it's not even up for debate anymore. Like, there's a whole dedicated page to it on the ACLU Delaware chapter website about Safe Streets. And so in my mind, I think anybody with any kind of common sense, Safe Streets has no credibility. When you're doing things like that on a routine basis, throwing people's moms down the steps, calling people the N-word, hitting people with your fleet vehicles, like, you should be in jail.
So did you have the gun like on your hip where people could see it? Did they see the gun and that's what made them search you?
Yes, that's the irony that Tom Looney, the lead person who was driving the vehicle, he stated that he saw the firearm, but it was concealed.
But if you had it concealed, they wouldn't even search you probably, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the irony. If I had been not following the law, then they wouldn't have seen it, wouldn't have known it was there. But according to the trainings that I had taken to be responsibly armed citizen, they explained what constitutes concealed versus open, how you have to have it showing, have your T-shirt tucked behind it, all the different scenarios. If you're in a vehicle, all these things are covered in basic trainings that you can take, and I've taken them. And the other issue that I was not aware of, that's something that's still being contested here in the state of Delaware, is, so when you're talking about urban areas like Wilmington, I actually had somebody who was a retired prosecutor tell me that 75% of the city of Wilmington would be considered a gun-free school or recreation zone. So the problem is that when you're on a city of Wilmington sidewalk, you're supposed to be exempt from that because you're not on private property. I have challenged this in the court with appeals and things that I've filed. They continue to insist that I was on school property because I was within 1,000 feet of multiple schools, but it doesn't work that way. I was in the video that the state supplied of me walking across the street just prior to the arrest. You can clearly see I'm on 4th Street, which is a very busy public thoroughfare. So again, that's something that's very contested, but it's put in place so that they can, in my mind, arrest as many people as possible, because there's no way to differentiate between a responsibly armed citizen or a criminal if you're just saying the criteria is being within 1,000 feet of various private properties in a highly urban area.
Yeah, that's just doesn't make sense. I think you'll have more success with filing a reverse or whatever appeals once you're off probation and you don't have to deal with them putting retaliation against you, you know?
Well, yeah, and the irony about that too is that when I'm able to get off probation, the lady, there's a program here in Delaware, and I'm very familiar with the lady who does it. She's met with me and some people in my family multiple times. I just talked to her a couple months ago. It's called the Apex program, and they get people pardons and expungements. And she is ready and willing to help me do so, but I would have to be off probation to put in for it. So she told me the very day that you get off probation, come to my office with the paper to prove you've been discharged, and we will start the process to get you a clean slate. But we can't do it as long as you're on probation. Even though it's been almost 8 years, it doesn't count. You have to be off of it.
Yeah, the reason why it's been 8 years is because it keeps starting over the clock, right?
Yes. Yeah, and the jail time doesn't really count. And that's another thing. Like I say, we need probation reform, and there are people pushing for it. And I hope that it works. But there's various Senate bills and things right now. They're trying to curtail probation's power. And one of the things they want to address is no more jail time for technical violations, because that's what tends to exacerbate this, because you put somebody in jail for however much of their backup time, and then they restart the clock on the actual probation in the community. So it just makes the punishment that much worse. If there was no jail time except for new charges, which would involve the real police, rather than right now, probation can basically act like quasi-law enforcement, and they can get you a whole new level 5 sentence off of a technical violation without involving police. And so that's one of the things they're working to reform, because that then makes the punishment that much longer in addition to the reinstatement. Because now the reinstatement may be a year, but you may have just done 2 years or 9 months. Or I've talked to people who've done 7 years on violations. Just violations. That's it. No new charges.
Are you serious? And they're just sitting in jail waiting for that long?
Yes, because the way it works right now, the judge, there's SENTAC guidelines or a bench book that the judge is allowed, even if it seems harsh, to give you a certain amount of what's known as backup time. So you could have a scenario where somebody submits a dirty urine sample, and the judge could say, okay, you originally pled to a charge that carried 0 to 8. And so even though all your only infraction is a dirty urine, you know what, I feel like you haven't learned your lesson, so I'm going to give you a certain percentage of that. Maybe it's going to be 2 years. Maybe it's going to be, 16 months or 2.5 years or whatever it is. These things routinely happen. The jail is full of people doing time for violations.
Wow, that's insane, man. I didn't know that Delaware is that bad. It sounds like
probation
you probably move when you're done with probation.
Yeah, there's a saying you'll hear a lot in Delaware prisons. People say, Delaware, come on vacation, leave on probation.
Yeah, Florida too.
Yeah,
Same thing in Florida. Because they have a law down in Florida that if you get in trouble, when you get out, you got like a certain amount of time. You can't get in any trouble. It's kind of like probation without being supervised. If you get arrested in that time span, they could hit you with more time. It's insane. So what are your plans for the future? And are they going to bring up the Merlino thing again? Are they going to bring up more things? Or do you think you're in the clear until you get off next year?
Well, it's really hard to tell because, like I said, the probation officer seems to be trying to help me get off probation possibly sooner. There's some more hoops they want me to jump through and things potentially, but ultimately it's up to the judge. Obviously, the major thing is the no contact with my mom. This wouldn't have went on as long as it did if that wasn't in place. So what I'm looking for is, some kind of way to wind this down as soon as possible. But I mean, the whole thing with the school turned into a side battle. I wanted to complete my degree for computer science. Wilmington University doesn't want to hear my side of the story. They have a wall up. I don't know if I'm going to have to be involved in some kind of civil litigation with that or how that's going to resolve, because basically I'm in the middle of getting a degree, a bachelor's degree, and then all of a sudden they tell me I'm accepted, I'm planning for that, and then they say, hey, we don't want you here. My rights are being violated in that regard. I don't know how to move forward, and I don't even know that I can some people said just go to another school. I don't know that I feel comfortable doing that until this is resolved one way or the other, because there's always a risk that I can go to another school and then the misinformation they were given when a school contacts them to verify my credentials and my transcript or whatever, which they're fully allowed to do, Wilmington University could say, hey, by the way, this guy, you might not want him here because we got this phone call from probation back when, and I can't control that from happening. I don't trust the school at this point. So I want to see that process through and get some kind of a resolution and an agreement that, that's resolved and that's going to stop and they're going to back down from that position. And so that's a whole nother battle I didn't ask for that now I'm having to deal with.
I would bring him to court if I was you. I'd fight him.
Yeah, that's the plan. I'm not,
Protests, no more protests. Go right to court. Because it seems like it pissed them off. The protests pissed them off, man.
Yeah, and it's like, to me, that just means that the fact that you wanted to do something thuggish to shut me down means, A, I'm in the right, that I obviously hit a nerve, and it concerns you, and you don't like what I'm saying, and B, I find it ironic that you're officially saying, hey, we don't want this guy here because he has a criminal record, but then you proceed to do something that just because you got away with it, it's illegal. Abusing a public office to silence a political opposition or somebody protesting or however you word that, that's illegal. So I find that ironic that was okay for them in their mind to do that, but it's not, I'm not worthy of a second chance, but it's okay to silence me using basically thuggish methods.
Yeah. Probation, throwing you in jail. Like, what the? I never heard of nothing like that in my life. That's why when I seen your video, it's like, what the fuck? I gotta talk to this guy, man. So, what's your goal? You're gonna go through probation. You're off next year, right?
Yeah. Worst case scenario, it would be February is where it's at right now. But I'm really hopeful that as this probation officer trying to push things along, my therapist, family, friends, and advocates, that the judge will find it in his heart to just let this die and be done with sometime this summer. I mean, after this amount of time, the 8th anniversary would be of this whole thing starting would be this August. So at this point, like, I'm scratching my head. Why are we still doing this? And the irony is they've spent so much taxpayer dollars on this too, because when you look at the amount of time it takes, or the amount of money for the time to incarcerate somebody, to have them on probation, for the different things, like the place that I'm staying at now, because I have a house, the one that I grew up in, but my mother also resides there. They don't want me there because they don't want me in contact with my mother. So they paid for a place that's actually intended for homeless people and people with, different issues and things like that to get on their feet. They paid for me to be here for a year so that and they approved it and said, you have to stay here because we don't want you at your mom's house. So like all these things cost money. It's petty. That's a lot of taxpayer money going into an endeavor for what purpose?
That's insane. They got that much control over you right now.
Yeah.
I didn't know they got you living in a place that they paid for. That's crazy.
Yeah, and and this is the second time this has happened. When I was in mental health court, they'd done it through Connection, which defunct agency in Delaware. It ended up being shut down because of some lawsuits and some things like that. But at the time, Connections was part of the Unified Treatment Team. And at that time, the Judge Roccanelli had ordered that I stay at a place through them that they were footing the bill for because she didn't want me at my mother's. And so, and basically they'll say, like, we approve this, it has to be this place because we're familiar with this agency and we can keep an eye on you here. But there's two issues with that. One, obviously that's taxpayer money. And I would think the majority of taxpayers, if they're aware of that, would feel like, why are we paying for this when he has a house he can go to? You just don't want him there. Secondly, it takes a slot away from people who actually need it, because I'm there by court order, but there's people on waiting lists for these places that really need them.
Yeah.
And they can't have it because, and I have to wonder how many other people, I'm sure I'm not the only one, are in these kind of settings because probation or the courts find it advantageous to monitor them when these places are intended for people that need, some kind of interim housing.
You don't seem like a threat. You know what I mean? You don't seem like a threat to the public or anything. And it seems like they're overreaching with everything that you're going through.
Yeah, I mean, like my lawyer said at the last hearing, like, you can't predict the future. You've dealt with my client now for all these years. He hasn't done anything to anybody. If the guarantee, or you just want to guarantee that nothing could ever possibly happen, there's no way to do that. There is no crystal ball. Like, can't enough just be enough? And my therapist said the same thing to them. And he's somebody that's seen me since I was a child. So he has records going back to since I was like 14. And he said, like, there's no issue with this guy or his mother. There's nothing for you guys to be worried about.
That's crazy, man. Well, I wish you the best in the future, and I hope it all works out for you. And let people know what your YouTube channel is.
Yes, so my YouTube channel is The Lion's Truth.
You tell different stories about everything you've been through and things like that, right?
Yes, and my initial plan, and I would still like to pursue this, would be to help others, as well. If anybody wants to come on there and share a story or things like that, because the next phase I would like to move on to is hopefully I can get out of the hot seat, get on with my life, and use what I've went through to help others with this nonprofit that I'm working with the YouTube channel, with anything else, to try and make some good come out of it.
Hey, let me know, man. I'll come on as a guest. I got a lot of probation stories, I can tell you, quite a bit. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to before we go?
I would definitely tell my mom, if she happens to see this, that I love her and I miss her. And I just want to thank, everybody that's, supported me and tried to help me with this. And I want to thank you again for having me on your show. And anytime that you want to, talk to me, just, hit me up.
Definitely, man. Thank you. And Mr. Merlino, come help this young man. He needs your help for some justice, reform in Delaware. I appreciate you, man. Have a great day. And if you like this content, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get my videos every time they drop. Put the bell on all. And if you don't like this video, too bad. Start your own podcast. Thanks, man.